You're listening to
and such a short amount of time to do it in. We were really
a Mamamia podcast.
Did you see that meme that went around with an image of the cast of The Golden Girls on one side and the cast of the Sex and the City reboot and Just Like That on the other? If you didn't see it, basically the Golden Girls, you remember the Golden Girls, they looked elderly women, all with grey hair and a lot of wrinkles. And then Sarah Jessica Parker and her castmates looked like sexy contemporary women. And the kicker was actually the caption that pointed out that the actresses were the same age when those photos were taken, in their mid-50s. It's a confusing time to work out what a woman over 40 actually looks like. Because maybe you also follow Paulina Porizkova on Instagram. I do. She was a supermodel back in the 80s and the 90s, and she's gained a big following on social in the past year or so since she started posting all about ageing and how she feels invisible at the age of 56 and how she hasn't had Botox. And sometimes she posts photos of herself crying, and sometimes she posts photos of herself in push-up bras and suspenders. Or maybe you heard about Linda Evangelista. She's another 56-year-old former supermodel who recently announced that she was taking legal action because she claims that she was disfigured by a cosmetic surgery procedure called fat freezing that was meant to make her face and her body thinner but didn't work. And even if you missed all of that, it was impossible to avoid seeing the image of Nicole Kidman on the cover of Vanity Fair. It went absolutely viral. She was dressed like a sexy schoolgirl in the photos that were actually meant to accompany her interview, which I don't think anyone read, about her Oscar nomination. So see what I mean about it being a confusing time to work out what a woman is meant to look like? I turned 50 last year and I don't have a clue what I'm meant to look like. From Mamamia, you're listening to No Filter, a podcast where people from all walks of life tell their stories very candidly and aren't afraid to be vulnerable. My name is Mia Friedman. If you've been listening to me and thinking, oh, I'm way younger than 50, this is boring and irrelevant, you know that if you're lucky, you're going to be in your 50s too one day, right? And I hope you also know that the images that you see now will impact how you feel then, because this soup of imagery that we're all marinating in, it lodges really deep inside you, even if you don't realise it, at every age and at every life stage. Someone who spent more time than most thinking about this is Kirstie Clements. She is the former editor of Vogue Australia, and she spent decades inside the magazine, fashion and beauty industries. Kirstie's worked with many of the most famous women in the world and the most famous models. And now she, like me, is in her 50s, and she's trying to reconcile what she sees in the mirror and what she sees in the faces of women around her with what the world is telling all of us right now about the right way to look as a woman. Kirstie's written 3 books, including The Vogue Factor and Why Did I Buy That? And no matter what age you are or how you feel when you look in the mirror, I think you're going to enjoy our conversation. But first, before we get into it, I need to tell you something important. This is not a conversation about who's had what work done or who should know better or whether or not someone looks good for their age, whatever that even means anymore. This is not a judgy conversation about what women should wear or how they should look. It's certainly not about shaming any individual woman for any choice that she makes about her face, her body, or what she wears. This is quite simply a conversation where 2 women try to make sense about our own feelings and try to understand the very conflicting messages that we're all getting from popular culture right now. Kirstie, you've been on more shoots than probably most people I know, anyone I know, and you've been on more high-end shoots with massive celebrities, massive supermodels, big budgets. It doesn't get bigger than Vogue. So can you explain from conception stage of the Vanity Fair Nicole Kidman cover all the way through what you think would have happened? Obviously you don't know for sure, but on a shoot like this, how does it work?
Well, I'm pretty sure the creative director was Katie Grant, and she's a big deal. Very big deal.
What does a creative director do?
Well, like a fashion director, they would come up with the idea for the shoot. So Vanity Fair is like, well, we want to show these 6 stars. Can you come up with
Hollywood issue?
Hollywood issue. Can you come up with a concept? So the concept could be as simple as we're going to have a satin backdrop and have them draped on boxes, which normally Vanity Fair have always done when I come to think of it. But this got some sort of surreal bent to it. So,
but then you've also been the editor-in-chief, so you've been in the room when the cover stars are selected, because that's a big deal too.
Yes.
So how would that have happened?
Yes, well, it's Vanity Fair we're talking about, so there's probably some box office shenanigans behind the deal of like who's going to be in the biggest blockbuster. You know, they're going to be hedging their bets and probably looking at Kristen Stewart, you know, as sort of we'll have a younger actress represented and a more mature one in terms of Nicole. And, you know, you're going to look at a mix to sort of make sure that you're covering, you know, everybody in your audience is going to find someone that appeals to them. And then there's got to be some, I would suggest, business decisions in there in terms of box office releases and what have you. Nothing today is entirely
So there'd be a lot
on a whim.
jockeying behind the scenes by agent to get their stars on the cover, because that would be part of their Oscars campaign.
I would suggest, yes.
Yep.
So there's all of that behind the scenes. And I think Vanity Fair is probably a little bit more political than like a fashion magazine, although they all are in their own way.
What are some of those negotiations that go on behind the scenes, like the power dynamic of, did Vanity Fair need Nicole Kidman more, or does Nicole Kidman need Vanity Fair more?
I'm going to say a bit of both, and it depends where they are on the sliding scale of their career as well.
Right.
But, you know, yeah, and then you would have, there's all sorts of stuff that goes on. But like somebody might say, I won't share a cover with somebody else. Because they release digital covers now, they can give everybody their own cover.
Because I'm still confused about what the actual print cover was.
Well, there may not be one. It's all very metaphysical now, isn't it? But you remember the Vanity Fair gatefolds? You're like, who's on the actual one before you open the gatefold?
So a gatefold, for people who haven't worked in magazines, is like a pull-out where it's like a long cover that folds back in.
Yes.
And some people are on the actual cover and then some people are inside the gatefold.
So
you never want to be on the inside, do you?
No, not really. That's being picked last for the team kind of thing. So you're like, oh, she just made it on at the end there. So there would have been a lot. And then I guess they would have thrown it over the creative director of, well, perhaps Katie Grant is. I don't know the answer to that, but they would have.
She was the stylist.
She was the stylist. So they would say, okay, let's come up with what is the idea. It seemed to me when I flicked through all of them, it was quite kitsch and quite kooky.
Yeah, kind of heavily stylized.
A bit surreal, a bit Alice in Wonderlandy or something.
A bit Alice in Wonderland. That's a good way of
explaining it.
A bit
of a kooky tip to it. So
Vanity Fair have the concept. The editor agrees on the creative director's vision. Do they then have to go to the stars and their agents and say, here's what we want to do?
Yes, they would. Yeah.
And the stars would be able to say yes or no?
Yes, definitely. So you would pitch it to, this is the person who's photographing it. They may bring their own hair and makeup teams nowadays. They used to go with what you said.
As the editor, yeah.
But they gained more power and it became they brought their teams. So you've got teams running teams now, good God. And so, they would probably bring their own hair and makeup. And then the stylist would bring a rack of clothes.
Yeah, let's get to the clothes.
Yeah, and say, this is what I'm thinking of putting you on. And then the actor could say, yes, oh, that looks gorgeous, or no, and they would flick through it and decide, yeah, I'm happy to go on that journey with you, or no, I'm not.
So I went and looked at the outfit. Obviously, the outfit, for those who might not have seen the cover, I'd be surprised if there was anyone left now, but it was a tiny little skirt that looked like a belt and a tiny little bra top, long socks that made it look like a schoolgirl with sort of little kitten heels. I went back and looked at the original outfit and it was on the catwalk of Miu Miu. Can you give a bit of context to Miu Miu? Because you originally saw it. I don't know if you were in the audience or you saw it online. What is Miu Miu and what did you think when you saw that outfit done the runway?
Well, Miu Miu is it's almost like the little sister line of Prada. So it's Miuccia Prada, and Miu Miu is loved by hardcore fashionistas because it's always fabulous. It's always something a little kooky about it. It definitely is aimed younger.
It's like a cool girl brand,
It is a cool girl brand, yeah. So when I saw it and I looked at it, and some of the little crop tops were like little cropped cashmere sweaters with white shirts underneath them that had sort of been sliced, and I looked at it and thought, it's a cute styling effect is what I thought, because they had that on and then they had parkas over the top.
Or trench coats.
Trench coats. So when I look at it, probably with my fashion editor's eye, I look at it and think they're not sending that exact message. They're saying, the cashmere sweater and the little shirt, they'll probably appear in store not cropped all the time. It's the vibe. It's a kind of an indication of what they're trying to say. And it was a little bit Y2K, the little flip skirt and minis would be back.
Schoolgirl, a bit Britney Hit Me One More Time video. Yeah.
And so I guess when you see the look absolutely recreated from the catwalk, when I think it's just hinting at bits, you're looking at it going khaki, cashmere, white shirts, parkas, all of which I love, but which I would have thought would be in a not such an abbreviated version. So that's what you're looking at, it shows.
Would there have been meetings before Nicole arrived where they went, okay, what we'd like to do is put her in this outfit? And what would have happened at those meetings? Nicole Kidman's 54. This is clearly like a very schoolgirl, very sexy outfit. What would have been the discussion that went on?
I don't know if they would have had to have sent looks through beforehand, possibly because she's not a fledgling stylist. She's like an iconic stylist. So I don't know that anybody would say to Katie Grant, send your looks forward
to Nicole's people.
For
approval.
But I'm sure certainly, because on the shoots that I've ever been on with big celebrated actresses, they will come to that rack of clothing with you in the beginning of the morning and your heart's in your mouth in case they go, I don't like any of this.
Does that happen sometimes?
Sometimes you can see them get a little bit antsy about things, and I honestly think a lot of the time it's because they're worried they're not going to get into them because there are often sample sizes. They're tiny. And I think some of them would think, I don't even know if I'd be able to get into that. When they put it on and they could get into it, you'd visibly see them relax. So like any woman, like when we walk into a shop, if you pick something up and it fits you, you're like, oh, it's great. Yeah. And if it doesn't, you go, oh, I want to get out of here. So they're just as prone to.
I've been on shoots with celebrities in tears because it wouldn't fit into the clothes.
And they bring all undergarments with them and sculpted bodysuits and things like that, But from what I know from stylists, I think Nicole's really up for wearing little outfits.
So, some people are saying, well, why are people even talking about it? She can wear what she wants. But it was obviously a calculated decision by everybody. Can you kind of give us a bit of a sense of what calculations everybody was making? Like, why would Nicole have wanted to do that?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to know what's going on in her head, and I agree. We shouldn't judge her. I mean,
no.
It's horses for courses.
She works within a system and lives within a system.
And I think she's like a styling machine. She probably knows her camera angles, and she's very big on wigs and hair pieces and all that sort of stuff. She kind of goes along for the journey. So I imagine they stood there and said, "Isn't this cute?" And she went, "Oh, it's super cute." And figured they'd do a certain amount of retouching because no matter whatever, there's still skin tone, in someone of a certain age that you would be taking into consideration. She probably just said, I'm going to go on this journey with you. And
it's like a character for her, maybe.
It's a character for her because she does, if you think about
that makes sense.
All the roles she's in, what was that one, The Undoing, and you're like, well, what has she got on? But she kind of created this character and this aubergine
that was all about her coats, right?
And hair, and her hair. And 3 million hair pieces, coming down the stairs.
And
so I think she probably has a bit of fun with it. And so this is not any sort of critical analysis of Nicole.
Not at all.
That's what she does. But I think it's the messages that we still, that we get. And we think we're past getting those messages. We think we want to just look at it and go, oh, good on her, cool.
Yeah.
Something eats away at you and you go, oh, God, why don't I look like that?
Yeah.
I've never had a stomach like that. Oh, no. There's something else that's there.
Yeah. And what's hard to know is that anyone else's responsibility? No. For how we feel? No. But as a woman, you and I are both around Nicole's age, it was a moment, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because it was saying, what did you think? I was like, oh, really? Is that the pinnacle of what it is to be a 54-year-old woman?
Yeah.
Is that how I have to look?
Yeah. I think what I felt, Mia, was conflicted because I thought what you just thought, then another part of my head said, oh, good on her. I know how the industry works. That's photoshopped to death. It's,
it's an incredible
it's
photo.
An incredible photo. But it wasn't until then I saw the Linda Evangelista picture on People and I was like, oh, my cosmetics procedure nightmare and did it. I was like, that's when I thought, well, God, there's a lot of mixed messages and I don't know what to make of any of it because I know we're supposed to be secure in our own skins and looking inward and embracing our inner, crone and what have you, but
our inner crone.
Our inner crone. Because I read this comment somebody put on my Insta that said, maiden, mother, crone. It wasn't a term I'd ever heard of.
The 3 stages of a woman's life.
And crone, apparently. Then I went deep dive. Well, I saw two interpretations. One was a woman at the age of 50 and the other one was an ugly old woman. So it's like, historically, we've put crone and ugly old woman together and potentially it only meant 50 onwards.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just posted the two covers on my Instagram and said, let everybody have a chat about that. It was really interesting how many different takes there were on it. Because you don't want to be a wowser and go, Nicole, what are you doing? Cover yourself up. Like, no, we haven't come that far to get to that point. No, that's not fair.
We're not saying every woman should be covered because every woman should be able to wear what she wants.
Yes.
But I think as a woman of our age, it is confusing.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about Linda Evangelista. So she's a supermodel who I assume you've worked with when you were editing Vogue. You've certainly seen her in person.
Yes.
She was absolutely iconic, and a lot of those supermodels have had a resurgence and they're back on the runway and they're back on magazine covers, Cindy and Naomi and Kirstie and Claudia. And Linda has been conspicuously absent. And then a couple of months ago, she came out and said she'd had this cosmetic surgery procedure to freeze fat and it had gone wrong and it had left her disfigured and now she was suing the company. So this was the first time we'd seen her since she'd made that declaration. What did you think when you saw the photo?
Well, I felt for her because when I read into it, apparently the fat, it was hard lumps and things. So physically it must be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But when I looked at the photo and she had on like slip dresses and a cardigan or whatever, I thought, you really just look like every other
a very beautiful version. Yeah, she's still Linda Evangelista.
She's still Linda Evangelista with those beautiful eyes and that beautiful hair.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what mid-50s looks like.
Yeah.
Not with the hard lump, but with lumps.
Yeah, and she still clearly had work on her face.
It looks,
and again, it's like, it feels like we're sitting here being critical of people, but we're not. It's more just, to me, it's like CSI. Like I'm trying to look at women and figure out, okay, what does it mean to look like that?
Yeah.
How do you look like that?
Yeah. And it's, again, hard to tell because while she was saying she looks terrible and has been hiding herself away and she's holding the sweater up, and I thought, well, we've all got those gels anyway. I don't know how, but you don't know how much they retouched that either. Was that actually completely her, with the harsh light and everything? It seemed to me that it was a little airbrushed. Anyway, so there you
Well,
were.
every magazine cover isn't it?
Pretty much, yes, unless they're making a point of it not being. So it's neither of these two women's fault nor responsibility, but where do we sit in the middle of this? And that's what are all these mixed messages that we're getting? And I think, obviously she felt that she was watching her fellow supermodels still have careers and things like that, and she may have put on a bit of weight and thought, oh, cool sculpting is going to help. So she was still feeling the pressure. She didn't feel like she could re-enter modelling. She was still feeling the pressure to look like Nicole represented. It's this sort of airbrush perfection. So I feel for her. I think aging is hard enough. Aging is a legendary beauty. You'd have to be pretty together not to have lots of internal conflicts.
Yeah.
And you've had people bolstering you up all those years and, oh, darling, you're the queen.
What was it like on those shoots with the supermodels? Not just Linda, but just all of them, like in the peak of it. What was it like?
I wasn't on lots of supermodel shoots because as the editor I wasn't on every shoot, but because we were sort of pre-digital, a lot of it was post-digital as well, but they were very professional and there to do a job, and they were tight teams, and not everybody was Instagramming and popping it up saying, can I put my arm around you and have a photo of it? Kind of different vibes. So the girls that are going there doing the work, and people were just, hair and makeup, or the teams, they were small teams, were just doing what they had to do. There wasn't a kind of, people weren't fangirling them or anything like that. It was different days in a funny way until it became, I really noticed the shift, of the digital phone obviously, but when you'd go to the shows and then the front row became a thing, and then the Corinne Rotfeld became a thing, and then people standing outside the shows taking part. And that, it's very different to how the models worked and the runway worked. So we've seen lots of changes about that. Well, now the audience is just as important as the show. So they were just really hardworking girls. And Linda was always purported to be one of the best models in the business because she was a really good model, not just because she was spectacularly beautiful, but that she's a really good model.
And what did that mean?
I just like being able to move in front of the camera and go on the journey with the photographer and the team, rather than bring your team in and tell people how you want to look. You go in and Grace Coddington says, I want to make you into the beautiful Scottish, take you into the Highlands and make you. this Scottish princess and you say, lovely, and you go on the journey. Do you remember all that with the tartan and the purple, the red hair? And
so they're almost like a muse that executes the vision of the creative team.
Yes, Linda was very much Stephen Meisel's muse. And so that's where you got all those beautiful, beautiful, extraordinary stories that took you on a journey, which is not the same when someone's doing a selfie, in their bathroom and getting 3 million hits. It's really different to the journeys we used to take models on. That's what I really liked about fashion magazines. A lot of it was needed to be dead and buried, but there was a lot of it that was really beautiful escapism and was really curating and showing beautiful images to women. And I think it's missed.
What's the difference on a set in terms of the dynamic, whether it's a celebrity or a model? Because celebrities in the late 90s, early 2000s began to replace models on the covers of magazines.
Well, that's the point, is they come with their own teams. So I was on a few, I won't name names, but you get there and you think, actually all I'm doing is supplying the paper to the printing process.
For how this celebrity wants to be portrayed.
Because your agent has said X, you've chosen the photographer or at least signed off on the photographer you want to work with, you've brought your own hair and makeup team, you're going to say yay or nay to the clothes.
Right.
I actually, that's why I prefer to work with models. Because
and then sometimes they want to choose the photos as well.
Completely.
Yeah, right.
Or say, no, you can't run it at all.
Does that happen sometimes after you've spent all that money?
It's got to that point now because they have their own channels to be able to, the magazine may not even exist if you think about it. You put it out on a digital format and say, here's the cover. It may not be a magazine. You wouldn't even know. Yeah. Hello, my name is Kirstie Clements and you're listening to No Filter with Mia Friedman.
And so when And Just Like That was rebooted, this is very much a topic of conversation.
Oh, yes.
And one of the, I don't know if you saw the meme where it showed the Golden Girls and then it showed the cast of And Just Like That.
Ooh.
And it said they're the same age. The Golden Girls actresses were the same age as these actresses are.
Wow.
What did you think of that? Because that's our age.
Yeah, I know. That's why there was such discussion around the show being rebooted. And I kept thinking, why is there so much discussion around this vaguely not very good television show? But it's because we don't see ourselves represented ever. And they were the Golden Girls in terms of casting, as, there was the good girl and the sexy one. And they actually, that's a trope. That's something that happens in television as well. But when you think that they are the same age, it's crazy, isn't it? And we've moved on and that's great. I mean, we really have. But then Emily Rossum, I think it is, has been cast as the mother of a 28-year-old actor. Tom Holland has been cast as the mother of Tom Holland. She's 38 and he's 28.
Yeah, so people who say that we shouldn't talk about women's faces and bodies and how they're represented and their age, can you try to explain what that means? You and I are both mothers of sons younger than 28 and we're in our 50s. So essentially she's meant to represent a woman who's older than us and yet she's 38.
She's 38.
So what does that mean when you are a particular age and you look into the world and in popular culture reflects back to you, Nicole Kidman, Linda Evangelista, the girls from And Just Like That, and a 38-year-old? What do you make of that?
Well, this is the thing. I have no idea what to make of that because I thought we were seeing progress.
Same.
I thought we were seeing Dame Judi Dench on the cover and Helen Mirren and, and in some instances we have seen progress, definitely.
But I don't identify with them either.
No. Then you get that fabulous at any age thing. It's
Paula
duh.
Poritskova has that great thing. She was the supermodel of the 80s who's now our age, and she has this hashtag between J-Lo and Betty White, which is awkward because now Betty White's died.
Passed away.
But she was saying that she's in her 50s. She doesn't look like J-Lo. She obviously doesn't look like Betty White. So where is that middle ground?
With Paulina Porizkova, sometimes I find that troubling because she looks incredible. She looks unbelievable.
She is a former supermodel.
She's a former supermodel. She's looked incredible all her life. She's never not looked incredible. She has a fantastic body and what have you. And she is always going on about the invisibility of middle age. And it's not a new, Germaine Greer talked about that years ago. But maybe it's better to accept the invisibility of middle age and to embrace it and to think there's something quite magical about being invisible rather than keep railing against it. Because you had your time in the sun, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Just embrace that you had that. Be grateful that you had that. I read this really great thing the other day where a woman said on Twitter, and she said something like, older women should understand that at this point in our life, and she was only really talking around 60 or something, this is a really great time to be listening. And I thought this whole idea about shouting over the top of being seen, being, all the time, sometimes listening and invisibility is very powerful and probably quite nourishing. So when I see Paulina's thing, I just think, just live your life. Don't worry about, you are beautiful. And if people would stop in the street and turn around and look at you because of the way, but don't be obsessed with it. My other part of me thinks, how could you not be? That your looks were everything.
Well, that was her currency.
Yeah.
You and I have been, and most women have been not as fortunate as her because we don't look like that, but fortunate in that our income didn't rely on our appearance. And yet you wrote in your piece recently about how you have several times every day you look in the mirror and think,
well, I have all my life, because I've never been it's weird I ended up in the high fashion industry really, but I've never been model, never had a perfect sample size body or whatever. And so when I've seen fashion all my life, I guess I've been quite objective about it and said, oh, that's lovely, but I never thought, I could wear it.
Yeah, and have you felt like being exposed to models your whole life, did it make you feel bad about yourself when you looked in the mirror?
No, it didn't, but I had a different job, so I wasn't comparing myself because I was the boss of the magazine. So I was—
Which is always a better place to be.
It's a better place to be.
Yeah,
I often used to say to friends, they'd say, my daughter's beautiful. And I said, well, could she be a really beautiful doctor or a really beautiful real estate agent? So I was able to be more objective, and so I used to be honest, Mia, too, and this is another thing that I used to look at the clothes, not the women's bodies. Where when everybody started to do that thing about the catwalks and can we see different sizes on the catwalk, which I fully embrace, but when it became about just checking out the women's body, you're actually supposed to be looking at the clothes.
That's always been the argument. The women are essentially coat hangers.
Yeah.
So don't look at the women. But what became complicated was when the women became really famous.
Oh, yes, or too thin.
And too thin.
It definitely
What's your memory of grunge? Because you worked through that.
It definitely went there. It definitely went.
What were some of the things you saw during that grunge time?
Well, everybody would say they've got to be that size to get into the samples, and anybody with any ounce of logic would say, why don't you make a bigger sample?
And why wouldn't they?
Because the designers did not want to see their clothes on women that were bigger than that. So it's just nonsense. It was too expensive to sample in different sizes. So you'd get these dresses that you had to put on the cover as an editor because that was your advertiser, yada, yada, all that stuff.
Okay, so Chanel's advertising in the magazine, so you have to put a Chanel on the cover, so you have to see what Chanel sent you.
And you have to use those. You have to.
Yeah.
And this season, and the girls were thin, they were very thin. It was really hard for us to find a girl to get into the sample. We finally just hired a girl and had to shoot the sample with the zip undone at the back.
Even though she was skeletal.
She was skeletal. And that's what I remember saying to Naomi, who was my fashion director at the time. I was like, this is insane. And so what I actually saw the other day on Valentino Haute Couture, which I thought was a really big step forward, he sent models down the catwalk from a size, say 4 American to a 12, which is 14 to 16, say, in couture.
What's couture?
Well, couture is $30,000 to $60,000 per piece. So if he can make samples at $60K a piece,
in a larger size.
Yes, you could have fashion houses. You could have done it all along. All you needed to do was size it just one size up for a minute. Then I think it kind of now it's exploded. And I think the fashion shows look a lot healthier now in terms of what they send down the runways. It could be any gender, shape, size. Like it is a lot healthier. It seems a lot more fun, to be honest. You look at them and you think, that looks like that after party would be cool because there would be a lot of different types of people there, whereas before there's a very po-faced sort of fashion crowd. So some of it's changed, but still poor us older women are getting some very weird messages.
On those photo shoots, people would say, oh, look, some women are just naturally thin, which is true. Some women are just naturally thin. But models, what do they have to do to stay thin enough to get into the clothes? What are some of the things that you witnessed?
Well, there was that thing that I said, and it was true. I was having dinner with a model agent, top model agent, and she said that was that season of the dresses that we couldn't get the model into. And she said, oh, yes, some of the girls are so, start eating so little that they've ended up on drips. And I said, oh, and I'd heard that before from models who had roommates who were house models that were hospitalised regularly on drips and what have you. And, you're sitting there you're having your dinner thinking, as a grown-up woman thinking, this is awful. And then she did say, I don't know how common the practice was, but she said, some of them are eating tissues because they swell, and in
Fill
your
up their
stomach or whatever.
stomachs.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how common that practice was. Certainly you wouldn't see someone do that. But I saw a model eating baby food once when we ordered lunch, and she was like, no, and she had a thing of baby food. So, and a hairdresser friend of mine in Paris said, it's the Evian spray diet where you get a head of lettuce and just spray it with Evian and that's lunch. So that's not that's just not models, that's fashion editors. It's that crowd, that wants to be super thin. But I do think that's changed. I really do. It's changed in the fashion arena because the consumer took control of the message and said, I'm not going to buy into that. I'm not going to buy clothes. I can find my crowd online. I can find my crowd elsewhere. So, it was something that was really insidious and did have to change. But then you still see, it still bubbles up sometimes. We're not off the hook yet, it seems, because why do we feel so conflicted?
The people that Vanity Fair chose for their Hollywood issue, I thought it was interesting. The 3 women were all sample size. They were all really slim. It was Nicole Kidman, Kristen Stewart and a trans woman.
Right.
And they were all very, very small. And in the group shot with the 3 men, the men were all fully clothed and all the women were in very revealing clothes.
Yeah.
So you would think, and it wasn't Olivia Colman. For example, Olivia Colman is also, she's almost 10 years younger than Nicole.
Yes.
She's out there this season. She's also nominated for the same Oscar category that Nicole is nominated for. But you can't imagine her in that Miu Miu outfit on that cover.
No.
Is that because it wouldn't sell? It wouldn't get the attention? Olivia Colman in a suit or in something with sleeves. Like, where's the root of the issue?
I guess it's the platform as well, because I don't think Olivia Colman would want to do that for a start. But then I guess Nicole is such an icon now. She's almost turned herself into like an anime.
Like Madonna.
Yeah, kind of like an anime.
What do you think about Madonna's Instagram?
Yeah, that's where she wants to go. I'm a huge fan of Madonna's, and she pushed so many boundaries in her earlier part of her career that I'm absolutely down with anything Madonna wants to do, And I think she looks like she's having a really good time, to be honest.
I feel conflicted because I don't think she does look like she's
you?
having a good time. I think she looks...
She's living a life. I think...
Yeah, I guess she's portraying certainly what you can say, she's portraying herself in the way she wants to portray herself.
She wants to portray herself.
But I think the most subversive thing that Madonna can do, and Madonna's always been subversive, or she used to be, would be to age.
Yeah.
And to show herself as she is.
Yeah. Well, think of someone who's aging
Who is there?
Well, the point being is that they've got to have something to say as well. So take, for example, Patti Smith. I love the way Fran Lebowitz, so they're aging the way they want. They adopted their look and they kept their look. I love Patti Smith in her black jackets and her long stringy hair. And then, in her poetry and all that sort of stuff. So there's something else going on. So going back to my thing about invisibility.
Yeah, talk more about that.
Is that the idea is that you're not going to have, the strobe lights put on you and maybe that's not that stage of your life. The stage of your life is to reflect who you are, in the way you look, the way you feel comfortable, and then it's more about, internally and what you've got to say. But I still think Madonna has good things to say. So I think Madonna doesn't preach or feel bad about herself. I feel like, to me, she still feels like a pretty strong woman who's just doing exactly, she lives in LA. I mean, it's all pretty warped over there. So she's just doing what she wants to do. But I think, going back to your Olivia Colman point, I don't think that's the sort of place she set herself. I was surprised to see she's as young as she is. She's only 48.
Yeah, she's only 48.
Yeah, because when I was writing my article, I thought, Olivia Colman must be in this basket. And I'm like, no,
she's younger than us.
She's just a woman who's just living living a truth, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
Hopefully we're going to keep seeing more of that because she'll age herself up. Has Nicole aged herself up in any movies?
When she played Virginia Woolf.
Oh, yeah.
She won the Oscar for that, ironically, with the big nose.
For the nose.
Yeah.
But she didn't really look old.
And we haven't talked once about the film that she's nominated for an Oscar for. And this is what I find so maddening. I loved her in that film. She played Lucille Ball. It's called Being the Ricardos. It's absolutely brilliant. It's one of the best performances of her career. I hope she wins the Oscar. And yet, no one's talking about it. So I want to go back to Linda and Nicole and when they choose to present themselves in the way that they do, which every woman should have the right to do, they know the impact that that's going to have, right?
When she put on that little
Yeah.
outfit? Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure. She
And
would
it's
have-
currency, that kind of attention.
Yes.
Is currency.
Yes.
And the best way a woman can get attention
Yeah.
at any age, no matter how accomplished, still seems to be to take her clothes off and show her body.
Yeah. Yeah. And interestingly, what is it about the midriff area too, Mia? There's something about that because it wasn't a bosoms and things.
No.
It's the midriff that sets off our hot
It's true.
buttons.
It does, Kirstie. Firstly, because we've carried children, as has
Yes.
Nicole.
Yes.
And I was about to say, I don't know anyone who's carried children and they've got a stomach like that, but Nicole does, and she's a person. She exists. Same with J-Lo.
Elle Macpherson.
Elle Macpherson. Not us.
Not
and
us.
also, one of the things
Well,
about
you're not too
being
bad.
our age is your waist and your middle
Yeah.
gets bigger.
Bigger. And I've always had a problem with my waistline. And then, yes, menopause, chunkiness.
Yeah,
that.
menopause, peri.
It's the midriff that sets us off because and if we go back to your Cleo.
We're triggered
Cleo,
by the midriff.
Cleo magazine, my
Yeah.
favourite magazine ever in the entire
Same.
planet, when Elle Macpherson was on the cover because of her insane abs.
Yeah,
It would sell like hotcakes. That's
absolutely.
like Kate Moss. I'm sure it's got something to do with a flat stomach.
And is it notable that that's just the erasure that you've ever carried a child or that you've ever gotten old? Because
Yeah.
people talk about lines on your face.
Yeah,
Your stomach is another place where aging shows.
definitely. It's the most youthful. It's the low-slung jeans, the midriff cutouts of the 60s, 70s with the flares and the flat stomach. It's
Yeah.
it's a very big trigger for us because it is an area that, we have
That
that
we feel
level
insecure
of,
about.
Yes, and we have an extra level of fat protection there, most women, for various reasons. So when I go to the fashion shows and my fashion director would say, oh, this is the look of the season, you'd go, oh, what is it? And she's like, midriff bearing or belts, wide belts. And you'd be like, oh, shit, I'm going to sit this one out. When's boho coming back? So it's intrinsically linked with youth and sexuality. And if you eat or drink, it's hard to maintain a flat stomach.
Yeah.
Or if you've got your period or what. So
Yeah.
there's something
Or if you're peri.
there's
or
something
if
weird
you're-
about
Yeah.
it just triggers us.
I think you're right. I think that's very, very interesting. And I think in summary, we're not suggesting that these women have done anything wrong.
Absolutely not.
It's more trying to process our own feelings about what we should, in quote marks, look like.
Yeah.
Because we're looking around for, that idea of you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
Well, you can be it because we are it. We
Yeah.
have no choice but to be women in our 50s. But what we see around us is so different.
Yeah.
And so conflicting.
Yes. And I think, it's not about the individual women or any
No.
of those images. They all get to exist. I think the issue is how do we stop comparing ourselves? Why is that our initial instinct is to look at and go, why don't I look like that? And I don't have the answer to that. You
Neither.
could have much smarter people on this show that can talk to you about that. But how do we get to that point where we can be really objective and say, she looks great, and she looks great, and she looks great, and she looks
Yeah,
great.
and there's different options.
And I look great too,
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, what I think we need to try to work towards. And so we shouldn't take any of those messages to heart. We should just kind of enjoy that it was a kooky fashion shoot and, we know Nicole's got trainers and whatever team to help her look like that. We should probably just enjoy it for what it is and try not to get that reflex, why don't I look like that? So that's on us really, isn't it?
Yeah. But I
Yeah.
just don't think that we should be criticised for talking about it. Because when someone shows you an image like that and says, oh, no, you can't talk about it, you're part of the problem, it's like, well, that feels unfair.
No, that's unfair. And you got to remember, if we're women at a certain age, we've had many years of, and I was part of an industry that was,
Same.
We've had many years of being inculcated by images that were not good for us. So we can't be expected not to kind of react to things. That's not fair either. So I think it's interesting. Like when I posted online, I got lots of women chatting as everybody pretty much seemed to say, let's support all women and let's feel better about ourselves. I think that was the conversation that opened up from it, which I think is quite healthy. Yeah.
I bet while you were listening to that, you had a lot of thoughts. You might have been thinking, oh, this is part of the problem. We need to just stop talking about women's faces and women's bodies. And I get why you might think that, but I strongly disagree. I think it's too simplistic. Because as long as women's faces and bodies are being used to sell us things, whether it's magazines or brands or clothes or beauty products or food or cars, of course we're going to talk about it. And we should talk about it. And I also disagree with the idea that it's not possible to talk about these things without being horrible to the individual women, because I think we're all on the same page, at least I hope we are, that any individual woman has every right to make whatever choices she wants. But as I always say, and as I need to remind myself, none of us are making choices in a vacuum. We're all marinating in a whole lot of expectations and a whole lot of imagery, trying to make sense as best we can of how we want to present ourselves to the world. So I want to hear what you think. You can email me anytime at nofilter@mamamia.com.au about this or anything else. Our producer is Gia Moylan. The executive producer is Eliza Ratliff, and I'm Mia Friedman. Just by listening to this podcast, you have helped send 350 girls to school today. To help us educate more girls in disadvantaged communities all over the world, that is what we do here at Mamamia. You can become a paid subscriber by following the link in the episode description for unlimited access to all the best content for women, including some special bonus episodes of No Filter.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.